Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ellen Massell, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Now today we're looking into the effect of the postpartum on the mother and the baby. If you're a new parent going through this stage yourself or just interested in this area of research, then this episode is definitely perfect for you. We're joined today by Maria Gartstein, Ph.D. She is the professor in Washington State University Department of Psychology, as well as the chair of that department itself. Thank you so much for joining us, Maria.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here to discuss this topic with you.
No, I'm really excited to talk about this as well. It's so nice to have such a normalization in discussions upon postpartum, because I know that we don't usually have a whole lot of conversation, or it's not a normalized conversation unless you're going through it yourself. So I'm really glad that we get to talk about this today as well.
Me too. And it's a topic that I have to be honest, I became particularly interested in after I had my own daughter and, had so many moments throughout that whole process where I kind of went like, wow, we need to understand this more. We need to study this more.
No, I am really excited definitely to talk about this because I know we definitely don't discuss it enough, and it's something that I really hope that we get to normalize, and starting off with the show today. So I know you also spoke about some of your research areas prior to us recording. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that area of research really looks into?
Sure. Well, I've been doing work related to how children and families fare for over 20 years now. And most of that work has been around how personality develops. And because I focus on really early childhood, especially the first year of life, we often refer to it as temperament. We don't think of everything that encompasses personality. It just doesn't show itself that early. But we do have these early precursors that have to do with how babies react emotionally to different experiences and situations, and also how those initial attempts to regulate emotions and behavior come online. It just so happens that those emerging regulatory capacities are really critical. And as I've been doing this work, I studied different ways of measuring temperament, and I studied different contextual factors like parenting and cultural influences, because of course we don't parent in a vacuum. And I've been very interested in biological underpinnings. And this is actually kind of how I pivoted towards pregnancy and perinatal effects, because a lot of those are transmitted biologically. So that's just kind of in a nutshell, the main thrust of my program of research. But, there are other sort of areas that are kind of related that I just can't help myself. But sometimes you have a question and you have the ability to answer it empirically. And so the work needs to be done.
Yeah, no, that's very true, especially how much it all ties together. Like it's all in that same process as well. Now, I wanted to know, to start off with, what is the most common misconception new parents have when it comes to postpartum?
I think there are a number of misconceptions that may be worth mentioning. On the parent side, I think, probably the biggest one may be that, well, this is all natural, right? So we're just going to come home with a baby and everything is just going to sort of happen as it's supposed to. And breastfeeding will just happen and the baby will become an alert and we'll have those really pleasant interactions. And that sets the bar really high because babies cry a lot, especially in the beginning. And it's very difficult for them to maintain that calm and alert state. And they don't really develop the social smile until like between 2 and 4 months of life. And so those first 2 months, if you're expecting kind of a picture perfect return home from a hospital, or if you're doing a home birth, everything, now we're going to live happily ever after. That's probably a misconception, because, there are challenges associated with not sleeping. And as I already mentioned, the baby crying and whatnot. I think on the professional side, a misconception that I've run into is that the only thing we have to worry about kind of in terms of mental health is postpartum depression, which, is a thing. And, I certainly don't want to minimize its significance or the need to focus on it, but many mothers are anxious. It's also a fact that women who have prior experiences of mental health issues, whatever those may be, they're likely to be exacerbated in the perinatal period, right? Because of the physiological changes, of course, and just all of the the stress. It's a positive transition to parenthood, but there are challenges associated with it. And so, women, for example, who may have experienced trauma, suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, may be re-experiencing some of those symptoms. And, I don't know, my bias is sort of like, to know is better than to not know. And so, I would like to sort of be told that, hey, this could happen. And, and if it does, right, just get the support, get the help that you need. Don't suffer in silence.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think especially, I love how you're talking about both the professional side and the parent side, because the worry sometimes is very different as well when you're talking about it. You're talking about the parents, and they're worried about how, okay, it's not looking how the movies really show it, for example. They're not showing how social media shows it, being like, okay, the baby isn't sleeping, or I'm not getting any sleep, or no one else in the house is getting any sleep. But when we talk about the professional side, we're sort of going straight to, I mean, I always hear about postpartum depression, but there's so many others. Like, anxiety is just a normal concern. So like when it comes to the professional side, there's always that degree of, okay, is it just anxiety, or is it actual depression of what to look for as well? And what are the signs that a parent should be aware of, that it is maybe just getting into postpartum depression, that they can sort of get help as well. And I'm really glad that we get to open up this conversation today and maybe hopefully unpack a little bit more as to what parents can sort of be aware of, and what other family members can also be aware of and notice the signs of when they actually do need additional support.
I guess I should also mention, that we can't ignore kind of the physical aftermath of giving birth. I mean, many, many women give birth, and, and then they move on, and they really heal or recover very quickly. But there's a whole host of potential medical complications that can affect women up to a year after giving birth. And so, one of the things that I think we now know from a variety of studies is that it's really important for mothers to obtain that follow-up. And in the US, it's especially mothers from, kind of historically marginalized groups. So I just saw data on Black women who give birth are 3 times as more likely to die of birth complications in the first year, following that birth, than women who are white, who are not women of color. And so we have to really pay attention to the physical side of things too, and to never ever ignore women's complaints.
Yes, no, that's very true. And that's a very true statement as well. Now, thank you so much for that introduction. Before we get deeper into it, I'd love to get to know some of your interests and maybe some recommendations as well, by hopefully playing a little icebreaker to get us warmed up. Now, to start off with, do you have a favorite book that you could share with us?
Okay, this is the point in our conversation where I have to admit that I'm a dreadfully boring person. I have not truly read for pleasure in a considerable amount of time. I was just trying to recall before talking with you today. I think I was reading a little bit during COVID. And when I do have an opportunity to read, so I was born in Russia, and grew up there till I was almost 13 years old. And so I still speak Russian, but unfortunately not as fluently, as I have. And so when I have an opportunity to spend time reading, I try to read books in Russian so that I can try to keep some of my language of origin.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have a favorite book that you could sort of share with us, maybe if it's in Russian as well?
I have a favorite author. It's Mikhail Bulgakov in, true Russian pronunciation. And his most famous work is The Master and Margarita.
Okay. And is that a favorite book of yours for a significant reason?
I think that when I read it, I was really struck by the style of the sort of marriage of fiction and some almost kind of documentary like writing, and which you see others sort of borrow. I guess I never realized that he may have been like one of the inventors of that style, if not the inventor. So I really like the sort of mix of reality and fantasy and having to tease apart, which is which, and sometimes just enjoying them sort of being presented together.
Wow, that's a great mix of genres as well, the sort of fantasy and realism kind of way of writing. I don't hear that often, but when I do see it, it does sound really amazing to be able to read.
I'm not a literary critic, so somebody may be listening to this going like, that is such an inaccurate description of how Bulgakov writes, but that's my take on it.
Yes, well, everyone has their own take on different authors. I think that's the best part about reading as well, is the fact that everyone has different perspective when it comes to reading. And, your perspective might not be someone else's, but their perspective might not be yours either. So it is all valid. So when it comes to movies, do you have a movie that you have watched recently?
Do I have a movie that I watched recently? Yes, I watched Barbie.
Yes. How did you like that?
I liked it. I liked the whole kind of deconstruction. A lot of the themes really resonated with me. I often tell my daughter how difficult it is to be, a boss as a woman. This like you have to be bossy. You have to tell people what to do, but you can't be too bossy. And so a lot of that really resonated with me. Yeah, so I did. I have to admit, I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy it, but I liked the themes, and I think the presentation was also nice.
Yes, I agree. I didn't think that I would like it as much as I did, but I went to go see it, I think, 2 times after the first time I saw it, because it was just a movie that resonated with, I think, every person sort of going through it in different ways really resonated with it. And it's hard not to, living in the world that we're in today. Now, how about podcasts? Do you have a podcast that you've listened to that you could share with us?
So I have a collaborator who is a quantitative methodologist, so he helps me with a lot of statistical analyses, and he has a podcast called Quantitude, and it's amazing because it makes statistics sort of funny and entertaining, and yet they delve into the most critical sort of quandaries of the quantitative world. And so I enjoyed, and I recommend it to anybody who's interested in numbers and statistical techniques.
Oh, perfect. What's the name of that podcast again, if you don't
It's
mind?
Quantitude.
Quantitative. Okay, I'm making a list so I remember, because I do have a few friends who are very much into numbers and numerical ideas as well. So I'm definitely going to send that over to them.
Excellent.
Now, thank you so much for answering all those easy questions. And hopefully we are all warmed up to answering even the harder questions that we're going to be going through today. Now, I know that everyone has a very different definition as to what parenting is for them and what the idea of being a parent is. Either professionally or personally, do you have a definition for parenting that you could share with us?
So parenting is so much, right? It's raising your child, and that encompasses so much. So I really think about parenting as kind of every way in which the act of being a parent can sort of be observed. So, for example, thinking about what you might want for your child when they grow up. Sort of what scientists would call socialization goals, right? That's parenting. Thinking about what good parenting entails, what you aspire to as a parent. That's a part of parenting. How you behave with your child, right? The quality of your interactions. Do you let them take the lead? And, enjoy some autonomy? Are you able to provide them with some boundaries and limitations, which are also really important? That's absolutely parenting. The emotions that come with attachment and being close, and also with being angry and disappointed. All of that is parenting, because, kids will do things that you don't not necessarily wish them to do. That's part of life too. Mm-hmm. And being mindful of all of this is also parenting. So parenting is a lot.
Mm-hmm. No, it does. It does sound like it sounds like a lot of role modeling and sort of also a parent being aware of their own emotions, their own reactions to things. Because I mean, we all know kids pick up instantly what a parent is expressing. If the parent is expressing anger of a certain situation, you can definitely tell that a child will also react the similar way. So, I mean, it's a lot of the parent also being aware of their own temperament. I think that's just as important.
I agree. Temperament, state of mind in the moment. Can I ground myself right now? Do I have the emotional resources right now? Because so much of parenting in early childhood, especially, what is required of you as a parent is being able to provide nurturance in the face of distress. And it's not an easy task. And I was actually just going through this recently because my daughter is a teenager. And I'm like, you need that with teens too. It looks different, but it's the same concept. Like you have to put your own stuff aside. They're not really sending sort of pleasant signals your way, but you have to work with that adversity and still give them what they need, which is nurturance.
I think I've had one guest on the show come on and say that parenting is a lot of acting because you have to act like a parent, even though you want to act like you want to be a human and sort of react in such a yelling manner, but you have to pretend that you're a parent for that moment and be a role model for the child as to how you want them to react. And when she said that, that felt very true with a lot of my friends when I was telling them about that statement, because a lot of them were like, it does really feel like I'm just playing a character, that I'm just pretending to be upset about a certain situation when all I want to do is laugh at the fact that they've thrown flour everywhere on the kitchen bench, or they've just disrupted their whole entire everyday routine. All you want to do is laugh, but you have to remember that you're a parent, not a person for a little bit.
I think there's truth to that. I mean, it's okay. So let's just dig into it a little bit because it sounds a bit sort of performatory, right? Acting.
Yeah.
But so the way that I would sort of talk about it is that you absolutely cannot just react. Like you can't do the thing that comes naturally that is what you would typically do in a situation.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't. But what I think acting really is sort of digging deep. So it takes mindfulness. Okay, I want to yell or I want to laugh, but I'm not doing it. I'm digging deep because what are my values as a parent? I want my child to understand that, it's okay to be frustrated, but we don't destroy or throw things, right? It's okay to be frustrated, but we don't hit another child. So it's sort of grounding yourself in these values that are not the things that you're thinking about in the moment, but it's sort of that mindful presence that allows you, I think, to pivot and be like, okay, but this is what I really want to get out of this situation. So instead of doing the thing that comes naturally, that's sort of, some would say, the prepotent response. This is the response that's most likely to occur. No, well, we're going to inhibit that and we're going to do something that actually meets my long-term goal of teaching my child self-regulation or teaching them to, cope with disappointment or, whatever the situation may be.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a very true idea because you're also still being a role model to a child and still wanting them to be, I think also wanting them to be a participant in society. You don't want them to be away from society where they're sort of acting on their own rules. You want them to also know that, okay, this is the societal rules or etiquette and how to handle a situation. You can't just, when you're working at an office, you can't just throw your laptop at the desk just because it's not working out or something's not working really well. There's certain ways that you have to act about it. Now, we're talking a lot about postpartum today, and I know that we've spoken a little bit about it earlier, but can you provide a little bit of an overview of postpartum well-being and maybe highlight some key emotional, physical, and psychological aspects that a lot of new mothers commonly experience during this phase?
So first of all, let's start with the fact that postpartum is a magical time. Like you've just given birth to a human being. You made a human being. That is an astonishing accomplishment. I mean, I know it happens all the time, but still, like it just seems like an accomplishment that deserves more than a moment of celebration. So there is that really positive and uplifting aspect to it. But also, birth is a thing that even if you're a young person who's healthy, like, you're probably pretty tired and you probably need some recovery time. And you're heading home to a baby who is not going to sleep through the night, who is going to need feeding and comforting, during the night, which is the time when you want to be resting. And so it's a time when I think we all need a support system. And that support system may be your partner who gives you a night off. It may be a nanny who you have the resources to hire, who can come into your home and give you and your partner a night off, right? But, or maybe this is another family member, but having a support system that you can lean on so that you can take a moment for yourself when it's something that you really need because you're just completely exhausted, or you're now having a difficult time regulating your mood, or whatever that might be. There has to be a way for you to be able to take that time and to sort of nurture yourself for whatever is happening that's creating you stress or causing you to be unhappy in the moment. So it's a magical time, which you should be prepared for in terms of having somebody who can be helpful, and and just being mindful of things that you need to be doing for yourself. I already mentioned sleep, but also having a good diet, being able to return to some physical activity, doing something where you're kind of taking care to address your emotional needs. Some people might meditate or do yoga, but having something that is kind of in your repertoire of behaviors that helps you get back to baseline emotionally. And I think that, being able to do all of that often requires not just having a partner who's supportive, or other family members or friends or community, but I think it also requires policy and kind of bigger structures that support the perinatal period. So when I was about to have my daughter, I was really shocked to learn that my leave for that birth, for that perinatal period, would be 2 months, and it would be unpaid leave. So, right, that doesn't spell support.
No, it really doesn't.
It really doesn't. And I don't know, I have to be honest, I'm not super informed about kind of those policies and procedures in Australia, but in the US, that experience that I had is not uncommon. And so women often feel pressured, to return to their work lives before they're ready. And maybe they physically healed from their C-section or, whatever birth they experienced, but they haven't been able to do these other self-care things. And now, they're back in the workplace and sort of struggling with that. So I think that's really critical. The other thing I'll mention about that sort of macro support or safety net is that, we do a lot of talk with mothers about the benefits of breastfeeding, which, those are real for sure. But we don't talk a lot about that breastfeeding is not that easy to orchestrate if you're returning to work. How are you going to do it? Are you going to bring your baby with you? Are you going to come home every couple hours? Are you going to pump? Is there a place at your work where you can do it, where you feel comfortable doing that, right? Because it's a very kind of intimate situation. Mm-hmm. So all that to say that I think that sort of macro policy procedure support, the way that employers handle this period is also really important and deserves a lot of attention kind of worldwide, especially in the United States. I don't think we do a good job with that.
Yeah, no, that seems like a very critical moment as well, where it's the bonding between a mother and a baby, and it's the emotion that's a lot of ties to just the idea that, okay, I've given birth, I'm now responsible of a child, but also I have 2 months to make sure I have everything in place that I need to build that routine. I need to build the idea of leaving the child for 8 hours a day.
And a lot of mothers feel terrible doing that.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really crazy idea at the fact that that's not a policy that's already in place. I'm not sure how it is in Australia as well. Even though I live here, I still don't know what the policy is for that. But no, that does seem like a really incredible time. I wanted to know throughout what you're talking about, especially when it comes to sort of the routine that sort of takes place, like building yourself up, building your own strength up, building the physical aspect of yourself up again. Is there a way to implement a routine before you give birth that can sort of prepare your body for like, okay, this is what I can get back into. This is the things that you can still sort of build in yourself, whether it's meditation or anything like that?
Yes. So there's a lot of actually continuity from sort of pregnancy to postpartum in terms of well-being, let's say. And
Mhm.
so you're exactly right in that if you can get into a healthy routine before you have the baby where you are reasonably active, I mean, obviously, don't do anything that is contraindicated medically, but active in a healthy way, healthy diet. I mentioned sleep again, but sleep is essential. So if you can sort of have that routine where you're kind of checking those critical boxes in terms of well-being going into birth and then postpartum, then you're more likely to have those pieces in place. Now, that's not to say that there won't be disruption. Obviously, it's all very different. When you have a baby who critically needs you essentially all the time, at least to start. But at least you kind of have a roadmap to well-being that's already ingrained and you've already had like traction with it. So it's easier to get back to that than to have not had that and then try to like put that in place after you have a baby and you have all of the, the new responsibilities.
No, that's a very true point. So there is a way to sort of prioritize yourself. I think especially when we're talking about that, a lot of it goes into um, the emotion that the baby has with you as well when it comes to their emotional development. And I did want to know, especially with one of your areas being sort of looking into early childhood, how does a mother's postpartum well-being really influence the emotional development and early childhood experience of the child?
Well, they're pretty direct links, because um, most babies spend most of their time with their mothers.
Mhm.
And so, if you have a mother who is struggling herself, with mental health issues, um, not not resting properly, not getting proper nutrition, those experiences, those adversities will ultimately, or are likely to at least, to impact the interactions with the infant. Um, in a negative way, right? And so we know that mothers who struggle with postpartum depression, they tend to have sort of, let's say, lower quality interactions with their infants. They tend to be less sensitive and responsive. Not, when I say that, I mean obviously not every single mom, right? All of our research is sort of probabilistic. It's more likely that that will happen. And moms who are depressed are more likely to either be intrusive, so they don't give their babies enough space to sort of manipulate toys or find out things on their own, which they have to do, um, or they're too withdrawn, and so they're not engaged enough with their babies. They don't give them kind of enough stimulation or enough of that kind of reassurance that they're always kind of taking the temperature of like, how are you reacting to this, right? Because I might do that too. So it becomes an interaction where there's less opportunity for infants to learn that their caregiver is sensitive and responsive, and that's directly linked to attachment. Like, where does attachment come from? I mean, obviously, a baby's an active partner and the development of that bond, but it takes a parent who's sensitive and responsive, and that can be compromised, as I just gave you an example of with depression, but also certainly anxiety can also change that dynamic and make it more challenging for the mom to kind of give the baby their space, to allow them to have those experiences with objects or with other people without kind of being overly directive.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to talk about the depression and anxiety that sort of come across when it comes to postpartum as well. What are some key indicators that not only the mother, but also the family members around them sort of be aware of, just so that, wait, let me do that again. Okay. So, no, when it comes to the postpartum depression, anxiety, and I know we spoke about that a little bit earlier, but what are some key indicators or warning signs that may suggest that a mother is sort of going through that experience of a
Mhm.
postpartum depression?
It's interesting because it looks different in different people. Like people sort of think the depression equals sad, but it's not always sadness. Some women are very irritable, and that can be a sign of depression. Sometimes it's mostly anhedonia, which is not enjoying things that you used to enjoy. So, I used to really like going for walks with my dog, but now it's like I don't even want to do it. It's not pleasant anymore. Um, I think that when something becomes when an experience with emotional challenges becomes sort of, let's say, clinical in nature, it kind of rises to that threshold where, like, okay, now we really need to do some intervening here, some treatment. Um, those symptoms are very frequently occurring, so daily. They're significant in that they cause a lot of distress or impairment. In other words, the person is upset about the fact that nothing is enjoyable anymore. The person is upset about the fact that they're constantly worried about what the baby's going to do next. Um, and it gets in the way of parenting. If there are other activities that you typically are involved in, I can't cook for myself anymore because I can't get myself sort of down to the kitchen. I don't have enough energy to do that. And I guess the other sign is that typically when we're talking about something where it's like, okay, now this is clinically significant, we can sort of consider it a disorder or likely would be diagnosed as a disorder. You have multiple symptoms and they cluster together.
Mhm. And so, when it comes to depression as well, and I know that's a big topic, even before, without giving birth. I mean, a lot of people sort of go through depression as it is. How does depression prior to going through pregnancy, does that sort of add on to make it easier for people to sort of develop postpartum depression throughout that period as well?
Certainly, clinical depression is likely to recur in the perinatal period if there has been a prior history of episodes.
Okay.
Um, I think when people talk about being depressed, they mean different things, but clinical depression is sort of unmistakable in that um, there's a lot of impairment that happens. Some people talk about not being able to get out of bed, not being able to feed their baby,
Mhm.
right? So with something like that, yes, recurrence is likely, and if a person had had an episode that severe prior to getting pregnant, there is a greater likelihood that they'll have a recurrence. And it's really, I think, critical to kind of monitor for these symptoms and to obtain help. And a huge barrier, let's just be honest about this, is stigma. It's admitting that we have these kinds of problems. And I think that, especially for mothers, especially in this or you perinatal postpartum period, because you really want their to be there for your baby, and the needs are so great. And you don't want to be the mom who's like, oh, I'm not up to it, or I need help. So I think that there's a lot of pressure for women. And I know you mentioned social media earlier. It doesn't help if you look on Facebook and, oh, there's your friend's smiling baby and they're so happy. And you're like, oh, I might need an antidepressant.
No, that's very true. And I think we sort of get caught up in that as well when it comes to social media. And I can have a whole episode on ranting about how social media really affects how we see our own lives, because where there's so much expectation when we're going through pregnancy. I know I have a couple of friends who, when they were planning out the crib and planning out setting the baby's rooms up, when the baby came, the baby slept half the time in their room because they couldn't manage to get up out of the bed quick enough to go and see them all the way in the other room. So they just put the cot in their room, and that's how they slept for the first 3 or 4 months because that's how it made it easy. But then the expectation of like, okay, I set up this whole room for the baby and this is what the baby gets to see, and suddenly the baby ends up with them majority of the time. There's like expectation versus reality that sort of really kicks in after the baby actually arises.
Yes, I mean, and something what you're mentioning actually is, I think, an interesting sort of dynamic, because that intimacy that you may have had with your partner before you had your baby, right? It's like now you kind of have to put that on hold for a while, and that may be challenging too.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Now, when it comes to attachments, especially a secure attachment, how can that positively impact a child's emotional development as well as their long-term well-being?
Well, attachment is really critical because we really think of attachment. When I say think, I mean there's theory and there's a fair amount of empirical evidence supporting that theory. That initial attachment to your primary caregivers is the blueprint for all of the relationships that you're going to have down the road. I mean, it's not that deterministic, right? But it creates this schema, like I can trust people, or people really don't care about me, or the world is not going to be a good place. And you can really see the impact of disruption of attachment in children who suffered adversity in early childhood. Certainly we studied, those children in poor Romanian orphanages very extensively, and it's very clear, that compromised attachment led to a whole host of poor outcomes, especially for those who were most impacted, spent the longest time in those institutional settings. And, we see it with children who experience the kind of adversity that we have in our societies. In the United States, we have child protection for children who have adversity at home, who are abused or neglected. All of that disrupts attachment, and all of that. I mean, obviously, abuse has negative consequences related to just those acts alone, but also just those kinds of adversities and experiences disrupt attachment, and that brings risk of its own in terms of later relationships. Are they going to be stable? Are you going to be able to kind of negotiate partnerships as you get older?
Mm-hmm. No, that's very true. And there's a lot to say, especially when it comes to the lack of support as well, looking after the child. I mean, if you think about it, if you have the idea of, okay, you're a single mother and having to sort of take care of a child by yourself, but also you have to go back to work and also you have to support, there's a reliance on that bond to sort of immediately start happening, because it's like, okay, I need to bond with my child very quickly because I need them to trust me, but I'm also going to be leaving them for 8 hours a day, and they're going to be sent into daycare, or they're going to be sent to family members who are also going to try to build that attachment to them, or in that reliance on them as well.
There's a lot of pressure there, right? I'm always careful when I sort of provide parents with guidance, because I'm always mindful of the fact that their expectations baked in, and that creates a lot of pressure. I think that one of the things that we can say safely for parents to be kind of rest assured about is that being sensitive and responsive and supporting secure attachment doesn't mean sensitive and responsive in every instance. There's going to be time where you have to set a limit on your child, and they're not going to experience you as sensitive and responsive. That's okay, right? Being sensitive and responsive doesn't mean that you're there every time they cry in the middle of the night. It doesn't mean that, you're not putting them, for example, in timeout as a way of kind of setting a limit or practicing a discipline. It just means that overall, their experience of you as caregiver is one who is sensitive, responsive, and nurturant, especially in the face of distress.
Yes. And I think the parenting style that I see a lot of my friends be like, okay, the minute the child cries, they pick them up. That's their worry, and that's their stress, that, okay, the baby's crying, the baby's in distress. I have to go run and pick him up and literally drop everything. But there's also one other friend that I have who also tries to teach their child the self-soothe technique, is sort of like being there, but not immediately grabbing to save them, just allowing them to be like, okay, you can calm down, don't have to cry. Everything is okay. I'm right here. Allowing the child to sort of build up their own idea of, okay, she's going, but she's coming back. She doesn't always have to be here. She always doesn't have to run. And then I always love to see, because every time my friend runs and picks up the child, the minute they put them down again, the baby starts crying again because it doesn't want to be put down. It doesn't want to be let go. It's always so reliant on my friend. And it's really interesting to see every time I go over and see her.
Yes. Well, so, to be fair, like when the babies are tiny babies, and in my mind, tiny babies, certainly the first 3 months of life, but really, I think up to 6 months, it's okay to kind of, I think, being a little bit indulgent in terms of like, oh, I'm just going to pick you up, or, you're hungry, look, here it is, have some food. But after 6 months, I think things change a little bit in terms of like, so for example, sleeping through the night, like the baby typically, we're typically developing, right? There are things that can come up that sort of change this picture, but a typically developing 6-month-old doesn't need you to be there to feed them throughout the night like they did, when they were a tiny baby, when they just came home from the hospital, or a month or 2 month old. And so it's okay for them to cry a little bit if they're trying to get your attention, but you're like, no, you need to start sleeping through the night.
Yeah.
It's not pleasant for you as a parent, right? I totally get that. And so this sort of like letting them cry it out approach, ultimately isn't harmful to infants. At least, many studies have been done, and it doesn't ruin attachment. But because listening to your baby cry, especially when you're a mom and you're like, it just makes you feel like you're a terrible mom. I mean, it does. I had this experience with my daughter, so I'm speaking for personal experience too. So, you kind of have to have it in your mind that this is something that you value as a parent, that you want your child to be able to soothe themselves. It's important for you that they're able, because like, everybody wakes up in the night, but the good sleepers are able to get back to sleep. Like, do you want them to develop a good sleep habit? I decided that, that was something that was important to me. And full disclosure, my daughter was like more like 18 months and not like 6. Right. But better late than never. And it's not harmful to the baby. It's actually beneficial in many ways in terms of these long-term benefits. But in the moment, it is a difficult choice to make for a parent, and you have to be kind of prepared for it, in terms of being resilient yourself. And like for me, I tend to run on the anxious side. So I'm like, okay, I have a monitor. If something is wrong, I'll know it. I don't have to run over. Like I have to just keep telling myself over and over.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I definitely see it my friend's point of view as well, especially when she's also an very anxious parent. So she's always worried every single thing about the child, about her daughter's safety. And it's really, I really love and admire that about her. I think that's one of the best things that she has been. She's grown up so much after having a baby as well. But I did want to know, what are some actionable steps that parents, caregivers, and some healthcare professionals can really implement to prioritize and support the postpartum well-being of mothers and children?
I think the biggest thing is, making sure that that you have a kind of relationship, whether you're a friend or a family member or a professional working with this young mom, or maybe not a young mom who just had a baby, that you have a kind of relationship with this mom where she can come to you and she can disclose, the lows. I really wasn't at my best today. I yelled at my kid, they wouldn't eat. Or I really, I couldn't do this one thing for them that I ordinarily would, but I just couldn't, I didn't have the energy, or I didn't have it in me to stay up with them and kind of help them through that. Whatever the situation may be, being able to discuss things openly, despite the stigma, despite all of the pressure that there is, to be the perfect mom. That is sort of ingrained in us by society and our own caregivers, right? But we're human. Nobody's perfect. There is such a thing as parenting stress. right? And it has to do with mostly with women feeling like we're not living up to the parental role that we've sort of created in our minds for ourselves,
Mhm.
with help from society at large and other places.
Yeah.
But being able to talk about that, to kind of demystify that experience, and to realize that that is all part of being a parent, that you have to kind of like not dwell on those things, but pick up and kind of get going and start over the next day. That you're going to have many chances to be sensitive and responsive, that you're going to have many opportunities to show your baby how much you love them and care about them, and want to do these different things for them. And having lows is absolutely part of, you signed up for that. It can't always be like, oh, we're playing and it's wonderful, and we're smiling, and this is how I what I wanted when I decided I wanted to be a mom.
Mhm. No, that's very true. And I really like the way that you said have that relationship between yourself and the healthcare professional, or have a relationship between the healthcare professional and the mother, because I think that's something that we sort of take for granted as well, up until the moment we realize that we need help. Then that's sort of when we start relying on them. But building that relationship beforehand, or at least talking with a general practitioner or a GP as to, okay, this is something that they're worried about. This is
Hmm.
something, and to have that no judgment there set as well. I think that's just as important, because you can have all these people giving you advice, but to have someone who actually sits there and listens to what your worries are and really try to calm that down, I think that's just as beneficial to making sure that the postpartum is something that is as joyous as it can be.
The judgment piece is really key. And this is why often family members aren't ideal, because they can be judgy. You can
Mhm.
have your own mom who says, well, I never did that with you when you were a baby, or helpful stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Going back to professionals a little bit, one of the things that I've noticed, and again, I'm going to talk about this experience kind of in the US, but I don't think it's just specific to us. One of the things that's happened kind of with our care for women in the perinatal period more broadly is that it's become very specialized, and I think that it's wonderful that we so many women, although there's a lot of health disparities, but a lot of women have access to OBGYNs, and can be managed with this kind of medical expertise. But we've really lost, I think, a lot of what paraprofessionals are able to do for women in this period. Your doulas, your midwives, who in other countries continue to visit women after they give birth pretty regularly. I have colleagues in the Netherlands, and we talk about sort of how this works there quite a bit. And I'm like, I wish I had a doula. I wish somebody came to my house every week after I had a baby. Oh my God, that would have made such a difference. So I think making those kinds of resources available is critical, because medical professionals, your doctors, your nurses, they're so busy. They will probably, and they have so much paperwork in this country because of the insurance requirements, that they're probably not going to ask the right questions. And if you have a mom who's giving you a little bit, but she feels sort of embarrassed about her symptoms or ashamed, you need to take the time to be like, well, tell me more about that worry. What's that like? Or what do you think is going to happen? Right? You have to kind of dig in.
Mhm.
And I don't see that happening nearly enough.
No, that's very true. And I think especially the addition of the what you were saying about the amount of paperwork that each of the nurses have as well. I mean, that's going to take forever to be able to fill out. So as detailed as they can be, it's going to be as generalized as they possibly can, just to get through all the patients that they admit, or all the patients that they get to talking to as well. So no, that's a very fair point. Now, this leads us perfectly well into the next section of the show, which is called the practice and habits. Now, this is a practice that you do yourself. So, what is a practice that you do to build on your own well being?
So, my practice that I have now adhered to for many, many years is that I do something active every day, or nearly every day. I take breaks, like if I'm traveling and I'm going to be on in a different time zone or whatever. But either I used to run all the time, and now some foot problems are preventing me from doing that daily. But, running or working out in our garage, but something where, I'm active enough that my heart rate is going up, and I'm sort of maintaining it at those high levels for a period of time. I break a sweat. I feel like I'm really working hard physically. That really helps me. I mean, I'll just tell you, I mean, I think when I started doing it, it was kind of for the goals of physical fitness primarily. Now I do it for mental fitness almost exclusively, because especially being the chair of the department, I get all the problems. So people will come to me and I'll be like, oh my God, I can't fix this and I can't fix that, right? But I'll go in that garage and I'll kick and punch and, jump around for a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I can manage. I have a kind of, I'm back to a baseline in terms of emotion regulation, and I can take things on again. So that helps me recharge. And I actually kind of came around to having this being a stable habit in a really funny way. So I started exercising many times, and then it just kind of went by the wayside. And at one point I had a friend and we were working out together, and she said something to me, and I don't even know where she got this, if this is really a scientific fact or not, but she said to me, I was reading somewhere that men are much more effective at losing weight than women, that they have a much easier time with it. And I mean, obviously there are physiological reasons and whatnot, but and she said, whoever was having this discussion in that forum said that one of the key ingredients to that success was that they treated it like a job. When you have a job, you don't skip that job, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that what happens with a lot of women, they're like, oh, well, my kid needs me right now, so I can't do it. Or this is happening, right? But if you can develop that mentality, this is just as important as my job. This is my job. Right now, this is my job, and I'm going to do it for 30 minutes, and, the rest of the world can just wait.
I think that's a very good point. I have really tried to build on the physical fitness as well, mainly because of mental health. And I think COVID has really helped with that as well, sort of building that, okay, I need to prioritize physical fitness in order for me to be at least mentally viable, at least a little bit more sane than what I really can be sometimes. And you really realize the difference as well the minute that you don't prioritize that in one day. Suddenly you're like, okay, a completely different person for that whole day, because it's something that you've forgotten to do. So I can definitely relate to that. And I think men do a really good job, at least from the people that I know. A lot of my friends do a very good job at, like you said, treating it like a job. Like it is the set time that they go every single day. I have trouble doing that. I go at whatever time I feel like I can go throughout the day, but it's not like okay, I'm going to every day go at 3:00 in the afternoon and go for about 3 hours and put full effort into it. No, it's more like I'll go 9:00 or sometimes 5 p.m. or sometimes like that, just because it's the only time I have free to be able to go. So I think physical fitness is a really good way to promote a healthy well-being, or at least a little bit of a better outlook on life as well.
And it's nice. I don't think this is a benefit that you get right away when you kind of get on this bandwagon of I'm doing this as a habit. But a month or two into it, I think that you kind of get the sense of like, okay, this is going to help me. I am going to, this is going to help me be saner. And so once you hit that and you actually have that sense, I think then it's easier to just keep doing it because you've now reaped the benefits. But it does take a commitment. Like it will absolutely not happen in the first week or even 2 weeks, in my opinion.
No, I think I've realized that as well. I think the first 2 months, but the minute that you stop, you definitely feel it. Within that 2 months, if you definitely stop, then you definitely feel the difference in that.
I have one other practice that's a little bit more recent that I'll tell you about. So I have a little Shih Tzu. She's adorable because I'm not at home. I can't show her to you. But she is, she's the best, and she's extremely spoiled. And so before her, we had Cairn Terriers, and those dogs knew that, to do their business in the yard. We would just let them out. They'll go do it, come back, done. Mm-hmm. Not little Mimi. When I put her out in the backyard, and she's confused. because she doesn't understand why she has to be by herself. Like, this is punishment.
Mhm.
So long story short, I have to walk her. She needs 3 walks a day. And at first I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I've got to walk this dog. But I've completely, I've done a 180. I love this responsibility now because it gives me a chance to be out there like the mailman, rain or shine. It could be snowing. It snows where we live. There's like a foot of snow on the ground, but we're out there, me and the Shih Tzu. And, that's how she rolls. And that's what we do. And it's become like another practice for me where I'm like, okay, I'm just here with her. This is what we do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. I think that's one main benefit to having a dog as well, is the fact that you do have to walk them and you do sort of have to prioritize your health a little bit as well, because it's forcing you to do that because you're also having to walk the dog. So there is a benefit. I have cats in my household, so they do nothing. So them promoting me to go for a walk, no, it's promoting me to stay in bed half the day. So it's completely opposite effect.
Well, Mimi's also a very good listener. So, a lot, and she's very non-judgmental. So I can tell her anything. She's always on my side.
Oh, that's good. No, definitely not my cats. My cats are very judgmental at anything that I do. So this ties us into the next part of the show, which is the open mic. Now, this gives you a chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, or maybe something you want to promote. And I think we do have a little bit of a topic that you're wanting to share with us today. So in the last minute or so, I'd love to give you the floor and to share the topic that we're going to be looking at today.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think the topic that is kind of nearest and dearest to my heart, and also timely because I have a book coming out related to this topic with my collaborator, Dr. Lily Lengua, who's at the University of Washington, has to do with the fact that we've been talking about parenting, but parenting is not one size fits all because, of course, child effects are real. Children, it's not just us kind of influencing our children, but they influence us as well. And so this is where kind of temperament really comes into play in terms of shaping our parenting efforts, right? And so our book is called Parenting with Temperament in Mind, because the idea is that you do need to do things differently for different kids. And it's because of these individual differences and how reactive they are and their abilities to regulate themselves. You hear related things frequently from parents who have more than one child. It takes typically more than one child to see this effect. But when you have friends who have more than one kid, they'll oftentimes say to you, gosh, this worked great with the first one. And now I'm doing the second thing with the same exact thing with my second kid. And it's like, they're just ignoring me, or it's like, it's just not having the same effect. I don't understand. Well, it's because of these biologically based individual differences with which kind of kids come into the world. And we have to work with them as parents, and trying to be effective with them means that we need to be mindful of what our children bring to the plate. Do we have a child who tends to be kind of on the fearful side? So they really hesitate to approach new things. If your first kid was like, exuberant, I just want to do, outside, I just want to be on the playground. Oh, kids, what are they doing? I'm going to do it too. And now your second child is like, well, I don't know. And I'm not sure about that. And I don't really want to go to that birthday party. Right? You have to kind of retool a little bit and think about, well, how am I going to manage this? So we have some advice for parents who have kids who present with sort of different temperament profiles. So, kind of running on the fearful side, or on the other end of the spectrum, a kid who is like not afraid to run into the street, right? Children who are impulsive or who may be easily frustrated. It's not that they're all these kind of different things that we can do as parents, but how we apply them and how we kind of use that toolkit can really make us more effective if we're doing it with our child's temperament in mind.
That is a very interesting conversation to have as well. I think looking at temperaments and how the different personalities of the child or different reactions to the child is very different with siblings. I mean, when you're talking about that, I definitely relate that to my sister. So when it comes to that book, is it coming out in very soon?
It is. We're working with American Psychological Association publishers, and they are promising us publication date this fall. So I can't tell you exactly, but stay tuned, and it should be available in your local bookstore online very shortly.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, if our listeners want to find out a little bit more about you, or maybe find out a little bit more about when the book is coming out, is there a place that they're able to stay in contact and stay updated as to the due date?
Oh, what a great question. So I haven't publicized it yet on my lab website, which is the Temperament Lab at Washington State University, but I will. And so I think that information will be forthcoming. We have one of our web pages is a publication web page, and so that honestly needs to be updated just a bit. I think I just looked at it, and most recent thing was 2022, which we have a lot more publications since then. But that's where I will have information about the book when it's ready to come out.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll definitely have the link down in the description box below if anyone is wanting to access that and stay updated and maybe get in contact with Maria as well to talk about a little bit more about what we've discussed today. Thank you so much, Maria, for coming on today and for sharing a whole lot about postpartum and maybe looking through some misconceptions that I think a lot of new parents or maybe some researchers have as well.
Thank you so much for having me on this show and for discussing this really important topic with me. I would be thrilled to talk with anyone who wants to have a follow-up conversation.
That's perfect. And definitely leave comments below if you want Maria to sort of answer any questions that you may have or any thoughts that you may have on the research as well. It's always great to hear from you guys. So I hope you guys learned as much as I did, and I'll definitely see you all in the next episode. You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.